funeral director in Texas since 2021, according to records. Now the state will seek to suspend and possibly revoke her license.
It makes us all look bad. And that's the sad thing about this.
Memorial Mortuary tells KPRC2 Laudermilk no longer works there, but declined to provide any additional details, citing a personnel matter and ongoing legal case. The State Funeral Service Commission says investigators will be looking into the business as well to make sure all rules got followed. I'm Bryce Newberry, KPRC 2 News.
KHU 11 News has new details about a former embalmer accused of mutilating a corpse's genitals.
Yeah, Amber Laudermilk, now out of jail on bond, and attorneys for her former employer tell us that her credentials and work history checked out. They tell our Katira Winfrey that this is a situation that could not have been expected. Katira.
Sherman and Mia, I spoke to the attorney for Memorial Mortuary, and in a statement they sent to me, they say they are troubled and saddened, calling the accusations horrifying.
Memorial Mortuary is where authorities say Amber Laudermilk mutilated a man's genitals ahead of his cremation. Executive Director with the Texas Funeral Service Commission, Scott Bingaman, says employees brought the allegations to management and management brought it to
And the Texas Funeral Service Commission anticipates its improved website will be up next week. As for Laudermilk, we've reached out to her attorney multiple times for comment. We were told yesterday morning they'd issue a statement, and we still haven't received one. Back to you.
Katira, any word on why she allegedly did this?
Well, Sherman, we asked the investigators this yesterday if they had any idea for a motive, and they too say they are still investigating.
I think a lot of people are asking and wondering. We'll wait to find out more. Katira, thank you.
The allegations here are rare and disturbing. This embalmer is accused of stabbing this dead man twice in the groin area, then cutting off part of his private part and putting it in his mouth. Investigators say it all happened after she learned about his past. At Memorial Mortuary on the southwest side, it's a situation that no family would ever want to hear about their loved one.
This was a vicious, brutal attack of a corpse. The person's already dead. It's kind of shocking even to me.
Licensed embalmer Amber Laudermilk is accused of using a scalpel to twice stab a man in the groin after he died of pneumonia last month. She cut off his private part, put it in his mouth, according to records, and told a trainee who witnessed it, "You didn't see anything."
Two troubled lives coexisted at the same time, but this person clearly, our suspect clearly, just went off the edge.
Harris County Precinct 1 Constable deputies investigated. They say employees were too scared to report her, who, according to records, covered the dead man up with a towel when a colleague noticed the disfigurement. While a motive isn't clear, records show mortuary staff had just learned the victim was a registered sex offender. How important are ethics in this line of work?
Ethics is everything in this line of work.
Jason Altieri runs Southeast Texas Crematory, not connected to this case, admitting this could have been hard to predict. He says families should be aware of where loved ones will be cremated, feel comfortable to ask questions, and be able to visit and see it in person.
Whether we have, a particular judgment one way or the other, it doesn't matter. We're there for a family, and we have to keep that in mind.
Staff reported the case involving Laudermilk to the Texas Funeral Service Commission. The executive director says it's the only criminal abuse of corpse case across the state in the last 2 years.
Dealing with the loss of a loved one about what happened at Memorial Mortuary in Houston. On February 7th, an incident occurred that was so disturbing. It became the only criminal abuse of a corpse case in Texas in 2 years. Yet the funeral home waited 10 full days to report it to authorities. What allegedly happened in that embalming room has raised serious questions about who we trust with our deceased loved ones and whether the industry has sufficient safeguards in place. Texas Funeral Service Commission Executive Director Scott Bingaman now warns families to use their licensed lookup tool before choosing a mortuary. Advice that came too late for one family whose loved one, despite his troubled past, deserved basic dignity in death. What happens behind the closed doors of a mortuary? On February 7th, 2025, employees at Memorial Mortuary witnessed something that would forever change how they viewed their profession. A routine workday transformed into a nightmare as they became unwitting participants in a case that would challenge the very foundation of funeral service ethics. It began innocently enough. A funeral director at Memorial Mortuary received a phone call from the family of Charles Roy Rodriguez to arrange his final services. During this conversation, a family member casually mentioned Rodriguez's status as a registered sex offender, a detail that would normally remain separate from the professional handling of remains. This seemingly minor disclosure set off a disturbing chain of events that nobody could have anticipated. As preparations for Rodriguez's cremation proceeded that morning, a trainee mortician was assisting with the final preparations. What this inexperienced staff member witnessed next defied belief and violated every sacred trust of the funeral profession. Licensed embalmer Amber Laudermilk, a professional with 8 years of experience, allegedly took a scalpel from her tools and began deliberately mutilating the deceased's body. According to witness statements, Laudermilk methodically severed Rodriguez's genitals and, in an act of profound desecration, placed them in the corpse's mouth. The horrified trainee stood frozen, watching as Laudermilk reportedly continued her assault on the defenseless remains. Not satisfied with the initial mutilation, she allegedly stabbed the corpse twice in the groin area with her scalpel, actions that crossed far beyond any ethical or legal boundary in the funeral industry. When the trainee finally found the courage to react, the confrontation only intensified the nightmare. "You didn't see anything," Laudermilk allegedly threatened, her voice cold and deliberate. The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud, creating an atmosphere of fear that would silence the staff for days. This single threat accomplished its purpose, establishing a wall of silence around an unthinkable violation. The case took an even more disturbing turn when, just moments before Rodriguez's body was scheduled to enter the crematory equipment, another employee noticed the mutilation. According to police reports, this worker observed the unusual placement of a towel and, upon investigation, discovered the grisly alteration to the body. When questioned about the strange appearance, Laudermilk quickly adjusted the covering, while dismissively commenting that Rodriguez had a lot going on with him, a chilling attempt to normalize her alleged actions. The atmosphere of intimidation proved powerful. For 10 long days, the Memorial Mortuary staff remained silent, trapped between professional duty and fear of repercussions. When management finally reported the incident to the Texas Funeral Service Commission on February 17th, valuable evidence had potentially been compromised. The report triggered an immediate investigation, revealing the full extent of the alleged desecration. What compels an experienced licensed professional to commit such an extreme violation of professional ethics? Investigators believe Laudermilk made a personal judgment about Rodriguez's past criminal history, a judgment that led to this unprecedented act of corpse abuse. In the funeral industry, where professionals are entrusted with the dignity of the deceased regardless of their life choices, this represented a profound breach of the foundational principles of the profession. Harris County Precinct 1, Constable Alan Rosen expressed the gravity of the situation in stark terms. "This was a vicious, brutal attack of a corpse," he stated to reporters. "When someone dies, there's some dignity that should be left." His words underscored a fundamental belief that transcends any judgment of how the deceased lived, that in death, basic human dignity must be preserved. The investigation revealed Rodriguez's background included a sexual assault charge that had resulted in deferred adjudication and required sex offender registration. While his past actions may have been reprehensible, the legal system had already addressed his crimes. Laudermilk's alleged actions represented a disturbing form of unauthorized punishment extending beyond the grave. A vigilante act carried out by someone whose professional oath demanded precisely the opposite. When the mortuary doors finally closed on Rodriguez's case, they opened on something far more troubling for the funeral industry. On March 11, 2025, Amber Laudermilk surrendered to authorities, facing a charge rarely seen in Texas courtrooms: felony abuse of a corpse. This wasn't just another criminal proceeding. It represented the collapse of sacred trust that forms the foundation of the funeral profession. The felony charge stunned even veteran law enforcement officers who thought they'd seen everything in their careers. In an unprecedented emergency action that underscored the gravity of the allegations, the Texas Funeral Service Commission immediately suspended Laudermilk's license, the regulatory equivalent of slamming shut a door that had taken her years of education and training to open. As Laudermilk stood before the judge, her $5,000 bond seemed almost trivial compared to the true cost of her alleged actions. The May 13th court date looming on her calendar marked more than just another legal proceeding. It represented the potential end of her entire professional identity. the consequences stretched far beyond potential jail time. Her 8 years of experience, her reputation, and her livelihood now hung in the balance, suspended in the same decisive manner as her professional credentials. The ripple effects of the case extended well beyond Laudermilk herself. Jason Altieri, CEO of Southeast Texas Crematory, voiced the concern reverberating through the industry. "It makes us all really look bad." His words reflected a profession suddenly cast under a shadow of suspicion. The incident threatened to undermine decades of carefully built public confidence in how we care for our deceased loved ones. Confidence that rests entirely on the belief that funeral professionals will treat the deceased with dignity, regardless of their past. Memorial Mortuary's own internal investigation revealed troubling details about how Laudermilk had allegedly operated within their walls. According to their statement, she had concealed her unlawful actions from the owners and managers, suggesting a calculated effort to hide her behavior. This revelation raised disturbing questions. How long might these actions have continued without the intervention of other staff members? What systems had failed to detect such a fundamental breach of professional ethics? In response to these questions, Memorial Mortuary announced a comprehensive continuing education program for all employees. This wasn't simply damage control. It was an acknowledgement that even established professionals needed reinforced ethical training to ensure such incidents would never recur. The funeral home's leadership recognized that technical skills alone were insufficient without a deeply ingrained sense of professional ethics. The case opened a Pandora's box of concerns about the screening and supervision protocols within the death care industry. Funeral directors and embalmers have unparalleled access to individuals at their most vulnerable state, after death, when they cannot defend themselves or object to mistreatment. This unique position of trust carries with it an extraordinary ethical responsibility, one that appears to have been catastrophically breached in this case. Industry experts have responded with new guidance for families navigating the difficult process of selecting funeral services. Their recommendations now include thorough research of funeral homes, verification of professional licenses, careful review of customer feedback, and even in-person visits to facilities before making decisions. These are practical steps to help families ensure they're entrusting their loved ones to professionals who will honor their dignity. The Laudermilk case exists at the intersection of justice, professional ethics, and human dignity. It forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about how we protect the vulnerable, even after death, and how we respond when those entrusted with their care abuse that privilege. While the courts will ultimately determine Laudermilk's legal fate, the funeral industry has already begun the difficult work of rebuilding trust and strengthening safeguards. What happens when the person meant to protect the dignity of the deceased becomes the predator? This case raises profound questions about vigilante justice, professional ethics, and the sanctity of our final moments. Scott Bingaman, executive director of the Texas Funeral Service Commission, captured the heart of this issue perfectly. Dealing with the loss of a loved one is an incredibly difficult time, and there are predators who exploit this vulnerability. His warning carries a haunting double meaning in this case. The vulnerability he speaks of extends beyond grieving families to the deceased themselves, who lie completely defenseless against those entrusted with their care. The funeral industry operates on an unspoken covenant that professionals will honor every person's right to dignity in death, regardless of their past. When that covenant breaks, it exposes cracks in a system built entirely on trust. Even those we condemn in life deserve the basic respect of bodily integrity in death. Otherwise, we risk becoming the very monsters we seek to punish.